Everyone, and welcome. We are thrilled to offer this new effort that we're doing from the Temple University School of Pharmacy Regulatory Affairs Quality Assurance Program called Pharma in Focus, the regulatory issues everyone is talking about. So our hope is to do this program quarterly and find topics that are of great interest to the pharmaceutical industry and are kind of the hot topics that everyone is speaking about. Today's session is our inaugural session, so it's the first one, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have my co-speaker here, Doug Campbell, and our topic today is a very interesting one. So it's on the FDA warning letter that I think everybody has at least heard about, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, to Purelea, and it's regarding the use of artificial intelligence in pharmaceutical manufacturing environment. So I'm going to start off and let Doug introduce himself, and we're just going to play tag team back and forth throughout this. Sorry, Doug, real quick. These slides will be made available to everyone. You will receive a link to the recording when it's available. And if you have a question, please directly submit the question to the Q&A box, not the chat. And so we'll try to help you with that. We've got some technical assistance in the background, and we'll keep on top of that. So Doug, I'm going to let you go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Karen. It's my pleasure. Hello, everyone. Greetings and congratulations on being part of the inaugural event here for Focus in Pharma. My name's Doug Campbell, and I am the owner and principal of Campbell CGMP Services. It's just getting started this year, but I was very fortunate to have a career in the US FDA. I started in the field offices doing inspections and was a drug specialist in the Baltimore district. And then I went to Cedar Compliance and worked there at what they call the Office of Management of Manufacturing Quality now, OMQ. And I was a compliance officer breaking down cases, working with enforcement. And then when I left in 2012, I was a senior policy advisor at Cedar. So next slide. And so now it's kind of odd for me, but I've been out for 14 years. I've been out of the agency as long as I was actually in the agency. And I've really been, again, very fortunate to continue the CGMP mission that is very much a part of what I do, and what I'm dedicated to. And now, I've been around on 5 different continents working with clients in all kinds of different operations and with all kinds of different goals and, really kind of pushing it. And this is a dynamic industry. So it's like the things that we were talking about 14 years ago are now different, from the things we're doing now. There's always something new that's coming along, but I'm very fortunate. I feel that I get to be a part of this, and I'm ready, for today. So I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thanks, Doug. So just quickly, a little bit about myself. I'm going to be Doug's partner in crime here for this event. And I currently am working with Temple University as part of the School of Pharmacy in the Regulatory Affairs Quality Assurance Program. And I've been doing that for about 26 years now, 25 years. It's been quite a while. And previously, I worked at Johnson & Johnson. So I was in the pharmaceutical side of the business, small molecule focus, and I've done everything from formulation development, tech ops, spent the majority of my career in Reg Affairs CMC. I've been teaching at Temple for the most part, so that at all this time, and that is really what has kind of spurred this effort forward. So we just wanted to take an opportunity to share a little bit about Temple University. We were the first university to create a quality assurance and regulatory affairs graduate program. So we are over 50 years old. We started in 1968. It is a very large, comprehensive, and extremely reputable program. The wonderful thing about the program is it is convenient. It is all available online. You can complete the entire master's degree online, and the courses are synchronous. They're live, so you're not just being fed recordings. And I think that is a huge opportunity that allows for networking. Our faculty are subject matter experts. They have all worked or are working in the industry and or the FDA, and they bring a global expertise to our program. We have a non-thesis master degree programs that are available in regulatory affairs, quality assurance, pharmaceutical regulatory sciences, and then also one in global clinical and pharmacovigilance regulations. And then we also have graduate certificates available if someone wants to look at that and is not quite ready to make the commitment to the full master's degree. So if you need more information, you can reach out to us at this email, or you can find us on the internet. And then I have also put a QR code here for LinkedIn, so I invite you to follow us on that page as well. So we're here to answer any questions. We would love to interact with you and work with you if at all possible. So feel free to reach out for more information. So I'm going to start off today with our agenda. We're going to go over just a quick snapshot of the case, who was cited, what the FDA actually inspected, and why this warning letter matters beyond this one small manufacturer. It has an impact on all of us that we need to be aware of. We'll look at some of the key observations that were made, and if you haven't seen the warning letter, it's available online, and the 483 is available online as well. It's fairly well redacted, obviously, but it is available. So we were looking at insanitary conditions that were found, some testing failures, component control issues, and just basic deficiencies in how the quality unit was functioning. And then interestingly enough, I think what got most of our attention is how that company used artificial intelligence. So we're going to look at what the FDA has said about the documents that were generated using AI and how good old humans are still required. We need to be, and we are required to be part of that process. And then Doug and I were trying to figure out the best way to allow you to have information to take home, take back to work with you. And we discussed some practical suggestions that we decided to include that hopefully you could bring back and use to help address any potential CAPAs or just evaluating your organization in general. So this is the warning letter, just a brief little picture of the header of the warning letter. So it's with Purelea Cosmetics, and these links will be active when you get the slide, so you'll be able to see that. A quick executive snapshot of what we're looking at here. It was a 3-day inspection. So it was at their site in Livonia, Michigan, and it occurred in October of last year. 3 core GMP failures were identified: finished product testing, component control issues, and again, the quality unit oversight that we had mentioned. And as part of this, the 2 products that were mentioned in the warning letter were Dervita Extra Strength Shingles Relief and Dervita Extra Strength Ultra Genital Herpes Relief. And these products are both homeopathic products. So that kind of brings in another piece that Doug and I will hopefully speak about. Doug, did you want to add anything yet?
Well, no, I was just that, the reason they were unapproved drugs was about the claims that was on the labeling
Right.
and stuff, and that's what put them into that category of unapproved new drugs.
Absolutely. So I'm not going to read these slides verbatim. We don't want to do that. We'd rather have more discussion and get a lot of Doug's feedback here.
Yeah, so we
But
can move. Go ahead.
go Go ahead, Doug.
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, moving through, like, we've got like a couple of things we're gonna hit. I mean, it wasn't just AI at this thing. Like, they had more problems than just their reliance on the AI, and we will focus on that because I think that's what everyone's focusing about on. But really, I mean, there were pieces of this that come out of every type of inspection. These were, like some of them were similar, but I will say that, like being having insanitary conditions, published as part of your warning letter, it's not something you usually expect from companies in North America. I mean, and not like it never happens, but in modern times, you don't usually see a lot of issues in pharmaceutical manufacturing with insanitary conditions, in pharmaceutical and I think that, that's really an indication, it's evidence for a lack of quality culture. And we could have a whole farm and focus on something like that, but in the end, like the specifics of this, it's like they mentioned specifically the bay door was open and there was no buffer there. So like, and normally you will see these sorts of things, and that's just a bad design, set up there. So, and these things happen, yet it's not something you bump into in North America so much. But I think it makes it even worse when there's also evidence of filth and insects. So that just ties it along. It's the so what. I mean, because they don't have the buffer and they can open up the door and it basically opens up the entire operation to the outside. Well, that's bad. But if you're actually finding insects and filth inside the building, as it's been documented here, that kind of kicks it up a notch and makes it more relevant. So it is something that, is definitely an issue.
Okay, so the next three slides are just the actual GMP violations that were identified in the warning letter. And the first one here, the firm failed to conduct testing on the drug product. And it was interesting. I went back and pulled the actual 483 and read that through. And they literally did not have batch records prepared for batches of product that were manufactured. They didn't have scientifically established specifications. They weren't really testing products appropriately. So it was definitely a bit concerning to see this. And even in this case, and I think everyone is hopefully aware that they even address the microorganism concern. So even if your products aren't sterile, you still have to meet the requirement of not or having to be free of objectionable microorganisms. So it's just something that is a fundamental requirement of the good manufacturing practices. The second big violation that was identified in the warning letter was the failure to perform appropriate testing on components and the products as well. But it really seems like they didn't have a great setup for managing, bringing in their components and testing them adequately. They were literally accepting them on C of A, and there was no identity test. And then the third one is how the quality unit was functioning. And in the 483, it specifically called out the fact that the responsibilities of the quality unit were not in writing. So it's just some fundamental errors that were made at this company that they picked up on. So I'm not going to read all of these individually. I'm going to move on because you can find the warning letter, and I think just having the conversation with Doug is going to be a bit more important. So I'm going to let Doug take over here.
Sure. Right. And I think that, yes, all of these violations are not uncommon, but I think that all of them together definitely put together, the appearance that there was a lack of understanding there, so it was much bigger than just their use of AI. And of course, that's what everybody's focusing on. But in this specific case, it's really surprising, again, to have something in Michigan, in North America, and have someone be so far behind on what the expectations were. and just blatantly not follow them. That part really is surprising. I've been doing this for a long time, 28 years. It still continues to surprise me when folks just don't get it. Or is it a lack of understanding, or it's a lack of effort, or those kinds of things? But it doesn't really matter in the end. It's a violation, of the regulations. And so here we're going to get into the meat of the discussion here and start talking about what made this kind of a novel, kind of a new idea that the FDA had never, mentioned specifically the use of AI in pharmaceutical manufacturing. And I think when we're putting together these types of presentations and we're having these webinars and discussions and conferences and those kinds of things, when you're putting together your presentation, the whole thing is about a case study. And that's how we really need to build it, for engaging and relevant discussion. You have to put it into some kind of context, whatever the topic is. And so you're always working to develop what this case study is, and sometimes you have to pull it from the ether, and you're just developing it, and it's sometimes hard to do. But in this case, I thought, what we're going to go through here and what I was reading in this warning letter, it presented like the worst case. You couldn't even imagine this type of scenario, with this kind of lack of understanding, and they're moving forward with AI without a firm grasp of how to do it. And then in the end, they weren't even challenging it at all. And so that was a big difference. So it was very strange for me that like this was the worst case example, the first real example that we have. And I really think this is the worst case it could possibly be. And we'll go through some of the details here. Let's go through the next slide. And so they get into the details here. It was really about the failure to do so, this review, and understanding of the output from what they were trying to generate using this AI. And that was the whole part. And they tied it to the 2211 22C, or the responsibilities of the quality unit there. And I thought that was a great way to do it, in this specific case, and moving forward again for everyone else. And we'll talk about how this was the wake-up call, and I think it really has been. So there's been so much energy that's generated around this. Um, and I think that some of us, like who are, certainly the compliance officers in the field and around, who are reading this sort of thing, and you get this specific, again, like this was listed in the actual warning letter, where they talked about the failure to do process validation, you know, and that they didn't do it because the AI never told them that they needed to do that. And again, to say that out loud, I can't, like that demonstrates such a lack of understanding of the requirements, that it's much bigger than just AI, because they didn't really understand that process validation was necessary. I mean, I'm wondering if folks like that really should be in this business. When you're manufacturing medicines, there's not a lot of wiggle room there. You have to know what you're doing and why. And this was evidence that they really didn't know. So how do we get to this point? Sometimes I always wonder. But that was very novel, like this idea, and to use that example that the AI didn't tell them they needed process validation, so that's why they didn't do it. I mean, wow, that was really something, I thought. Okay, next slide. Um, and so we're getting deeper into, what it meant to have this inappropriate use, right? And this was just a reminder to the company here, in this verbiage where they talk about it, it has to be, no matter how you're doing it, but once the output comes out, it has to be reviewed and verified and cleared here by an authorized human representative, which I thought that was an interesting way to put it. That's kind of it can be delegated in that sense. So it's like it's not how that it has to come directly from that company's quality unit, or the QA group. But to talk about multidisciplinary team, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But wondering now, like depending on the output and what we were using the AI for, it was like, do you need an SME, like a subject matter expert, on the front end or the back end? We're talking about the inputs or the outputs, but this is ultimately that, how you're supporting your risk-based decision making when you're using the AI there. Next, yeah. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and the inspection, coming when it did, I'm wondering, I was like, I'm supposing that these operations that were taking place and this testing and these manufacturing operations were probably taking place in 24 and before this guidance was actually out and available to the public. But I don't know that it would have helped this company. They seem to be driving forward with it. But I really have to say that, like, and I've been involved with guidances, developing them and drafting them, publishing them, those sorts of things, going around, giving presentations on new guidance as it comes out of the FDA and those things. I was really impressed with this guidance, and the more I get into it, I think it is a high level guidance, and most of them are, but in this case, it really provides the mechanism that you need to document and support the use of the AI if you get challenged by the FDA. But the step-by-step process where they go through the inputs and verifying the outputs is something that you don't really find in a lot of FDA guidance. So to have it that kind of structured, so it's absolutely developing the expectation. And there are important parts in here where they actually reach out and say, like, they want you to engage with the FDA to determine whether the proposed use of AI is within the scope of the guidance. Meaning, are you, like, you want to use some AI? Is this a GMP function? Or there's some discussion about whether it really is GMP or not. Like a business practice or, like, process flows, those kinds of things. They might have a connection, but, so that's where the question might come in. The FDA is asking, or suggesting that you can reach out to them and kind of hash it out with them to understand whether it really would follow in like a GMP part and be subject to the guidance and the instructions and expectations inside of the guidance. But in the end, it makes perfect sense. They talk about, the data for input must be fit for use, along with considerations for data drift. So again, to kind of put those kinds of phrases in there and kind of opening up the discussion the way they did, um, and then, this idea again, they're going to have to develop a multidisciplinary team. I mean, it only makes sense that you're going to need folks with a GMP background, and a quality assurance background. And then depending on where you're using the AI, a production or laboratory, background. But then most importantly, you're going to have someone on the team or some people who have a background in how to use the AI model, that format. Um, so that's what's, I think that this guidance and people, I'm hoping that more people are going into it, especially after this warning letter to really see exactly how the FDA wants you to go about this.
Okay, so we did want to share the regulatory conclusions that were shared with the warning letter, and ultimately it said that the products that they had manufactured, as Doug had previously mentioned, based on the intended use claims, were considered to be unapproved new drugs under 505A. So they were manufacturing unapproved drugs, according to the FDA, despite the fact that they were homeopathic. And the letter also, and I think this is really interesting, definitely reiterates the fact that homeopathic products are subject to the same controls and requirements. You don't get a get out of jail free card just because your product is homeopathic versus a traditional pharmaceutical product. So I think these are just two important items that came out of that warning letter.
Hmm.
And then to be just for awareness, I guess I should say, we wanted to make sure folks know there is a guidance that was published in December of 2022 on homeopathic drug products, and it is available to you. The link is here. So we're not going to get into it, but we just wanted folks to be aware that this was available. And then we were discussing some of the main takeaways that you could go back to your leadership with or go back to your management with and share. And from this experience and looking at this warning letter, we hit three main points. The quality unit authority, quality has to be part of this process. They've got to own it. I'm just going to mention these briefly, Doug, and then I'll let you
Sure.
reiterate and share more.
Okay.
You need science before release. You can't just release products, and you have to make sure that your specs are appropriate, that they're scientifically justified, that your validation is good, that the methods you're using are scientifically justified. You can't just let AI do that for you. It's kind of scary to see if they think about what they actually did. And then governance over the tools that you use. How do you manage the tools that you use at your company? The, we were talking about it, and it's not that I think some folks are concerned with that AI can't be used. And that's not what we're saying at all. And that's not the intent here. It's just how do you use it? How do you vet it? And how do you ensure that its use is appropriate and adequate for what our needs are in this industry? So, Doug, I'm going to let you jump in here and continue.
Sure. I would just add that yes, I mean I agree that the discussions and like I said before, like what the violations there with the quality unit and the testing and the lack of testing and those kinds of things. I mean like I'm surprised we have to say that out loud. I mean like most folks would know like that. I go back to this like basic understanding of what's required, and the requirements of the regulations when you're manufacturing pharmaceuticals. And again, like even if they're homeopathic, there's no wiggle room there. There are differences, and we could probably have a webinar on just that. But in this case, it didn't really matter, about we're making medicines, and so obviously there would be some efforts and requirements that you needed to meet. So, having the quality unit be, oversight, that's part of the definition of CGMP, right? And so it goes without saying that your testing would be scientifically based and those kinds of things. But if you're not doing the testing, then you have a much bigger problem. And I mean, but I thought it was the governance over the tools part. And what we're talking about here is just a tool. AI is a tool, and I don't think we really know how to use it yet. Not all of us, but we'll get to that point. And it's like for 20 years we've been talking about Excel spreadsheets, and that's been kind of dynamic about how to go about validating and having how we're using that tool, whether it be a GMP function or not, and those kinds of things, and when it is, what's necessary and required for for just plain old software validation. We're focusing on inputs and outputs here. But I thought like having the data integrity kind of function here, like the idea of it there, and maybe your AI policy, needs to be on a firm foundation in data knowledge. And without that, you shouldn't even consider that you were ready to move to using an AI tool.
Okay.
And then I thought, like, here we kind of broke down some of the, again, some of the big ticket items that were coming out of this warning letter, that were coming out of this case, this inspection, and everything that happened afterwards. And it's clear that you're going to have, you're going to have a plan for how you're going to use the AI, and there's no question that the review and verification of the output will be part of that, like quality unit effectiveness should go without saying. I think there are some things here, and like these are kind of the big takeaways here. But the testing of non-sterile products for micro has been a discussion for about 10 years. We have a USP chapter that discusses just that, but it's not the first thing you're thinking about when you're manufacturing. So it could be something that you're not really considering for folks that are in that non-sterile world. But there are concerns, and sometimes they're very surprising, where micro will show up where you wouldn't expect it to, where the water activity might be too low for something like that, and yet there are concerns for it. So that has to be something that's kind of a heightened awareness as well. Everyone is managing risk in their supplier program, and that's what all of these things are about here. It's really about effective risk management, you know. And then inspection readiness. I think has been another hot topic for this year, especially for the folks in Europe and Asia who are now having unannounced inspections from the US FDA. And so inspection readiness has never been more important. But now we have to add into it a part of, okay, we're using AI. How are we going to be able to demonstrate our control of the AI and how we're using it to the FDA when they come in for inspection? So it's just one more bullet point on the list of things we need to be ready for. But I think that yes. Okay,
Okay,
next
so
slide.
yep.
So we're getting down to the kind of conclusion areas parts is, I think that this is, it wasn't a story about AI gone wrong. It was more about the use of it there, and I think it's a reminder that, you need to develop a robust quality management system before you even think about implementing AI. And that's what we were saying. Like there were some fundamental failures here that weren't even connected to the way that they were using AIs. Like they didn't have a basic understanding of the requirements there. That's not going to work. So, but having a robust QMS before you even think about start using, implementing a tool like AI is going to be an important step. I think everybody should consider that. AI, it's not a magic potion, and there's a lot of chatter and noise about it right now that we're going to still be working through for some time, I believe. But there is a way to make this work. And so, what we're hoping for, I'm certainly hoping that this case will generate enough attention to provide a warning to the rest of the pharmaceutical industry. And I think it has. I mean, there's been a lot of buzz about this. Every conference that you're going to go to or webinar, like every day in your feed, at least mine in LinkedIn, someone's writing something about AI and how like the managers and the C-suite, they want it and they want it now. I was like, what are we going to use it for? But no one knows, you know. And I think it was last September at the PDA conference where Peter Baker said that we have all jumped into the deep end, but none of us know how to swim. And I thought that was the perfect analogy, and that was last September. I'm not sure we're any farther along right now. And of course, this warning letter coming out should have been a call to everyone there. But ultimately, we're going to have to consider a series of controlled and calculated steps that will lead to success. Using this tool, developing the multidisciplinary team, I think is key to that. And that will be dynamic depending on how we're going to use this tool. And then I would say that, you'd have to really master the control of generative AI before launching into projects using agentic AI. And we didn't really get into those differences and things. I think you can look it up. There's a lot of information about it. And, it's like generative AI just putting out some input, or agentic AI is actually, monitoring and the process and having inputs without the human intervention there. So that makes it even more difficult when you're verifying the next step because it's not asking to do it. It's just doing it through the AI model.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting here. I kind of like this top bullet point where it says that AI can assist the system, but it cannot be the system. So I just think it's just something to take. It just reiterates exactly what we've been saying, and the just the outcome, the ramifications of that letter. Doug, did you want to do this
I
one?
will. Okay, sure. Let me. So I think once again, I think there were some takeaways here. Um, there is a path forward with this. We will get there. It might not be in 2026 or even 2027, but we will get there. And I think that there has to be an understanding of the current limitations of the AI models. Bias, hallucinations, garbage in, garbage out. I keep using that because we've been using that all along, for things like that. But there are limitations to these AI models, and of course, they're continuing to develop and that sort of thing. But most importantly, you have to understand the FDA's expectations related to the use of the AI. And I suggest that everyone who is thinking about this, be very well versed in that guidance. It will lead you right to where you need to be.
So I think it's interesting. Like this warning letter definitely just reinforces the old traditional GMP truth that we all know in our new digital world that we are living in. So this last slide here, we're almost done. We're trying to keep it around 30 minutes or so, and then have time for questions. our thought was to share some potential discussion prompts that you can take back with you and have discussions at work and with your teams. So just things to think about, like where in your GMP workflow at your company could AI generated text or recommendations enter approved records without an adequate review? And so that's where, in the previous slide that Doug was talking about, you need to go back and map out where you are using AI in your company. And that could be quite an exercise. You know,
Mm.
are you using it in the manufacturing environment? Are you using it to generate documents that will be filed with health authorities? You know, are you using it in areas where you're making decisions on batch release? Those are areas that you really want to try to pay attention to. Um, a, a second question you might want to go back and ask about is, are our micro testing and objectionable organism controls in check? You know, just go back and verify that with your company. Doug, do you want to take the last two?
Sure. And so again, like talking about COAs and this is straight from the regulations. I mean, this shouldn't be something new, but understanding the quality of the product that you're getting there and developing the history of the supplier, it's going to be, it's critical to the operation. And again, for me, talking about the quality unit, demonstrated control over procedures and batch review, for sure. Process validation, I think, that's an oversight question. But, when I'm doing mock inspections where I'm getting in and working with folks, boots on the ground, my question is always like, whatever we're discussing, like, how is quality involved in this process? Meaning like the oversight part of that. Have they delegated it in some way, or it's a direct oversight coming from QA? And that's on a risk-based approach. It should be, so that you're thinking about when it's most important for QA to have that direct oversight. And again, when we're first getting into, our first foray into using AI and using the generated output to make decisions here, QA would have to be directly involved with that oversight for a long time until we were able to get to the point where we felt comfortable, with the output and moving forward with it.
Okay, and so we are perfectly, when in regards to timing, we're good. We got about 20 minutes left to answer a few questions, Doug, if you're okay with that.
I am.
So the first one that is provided to us says, will artificial intelligence be integrated into 21 CFR in the near future?
Well, the regulates 21 CFR 211 was
Yeah.
promulgated in 1978. And there haven't been any real additions to that since then. I mean, now where it comes from is in guidance, and I think again, like that's the part where I mentioned that they use 211 22C and tying this violation to the quality oversight or the quality of responsibilities that were not met there. You need that kind of you have the basis there for that requirement. And so it doesn't need to, necessarily add in something specific about AI. And you really need like an act of Congress in order to do
Yeah.
this. So it's not an easy thing to do. And so I doubt that there will be any time soon adding AI into the regulations 21 CFR 211. It will, we have this guidance now, and that's how it will work.
Okay, the next question is interesting, and it'll be interesting to hear your feedback. Would the FDA put this company under a consent decree, noting that there were so many foundational problems?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a process for the enforcement, right? I mean, the inspection comes and then the outcome there, then we make a decision at the compliance office about what enforcement is necessary. In this case, they went with a warning letter. I mean, I think the company actually mentioned that they were going to stop production and they're going to try to get it together before, and they're going to let them know. And there was a part in the warning letter, but they were supposed to let them know when they were going to get back up to into production, and then also if they were going to continue to use AI and how they had made the specific corrections that were necessary for that. Um, but I don't think that that will be the case.
And this is kind of interesting. There's another question here from an individual that says in their workplace, the company is incorporating AI into deviation writing for the GMP manufacturing space. But they are stopping the investigation at human error. So doesn't this seem like a convenient way to quickly close a deviation while scapegoating an employee, risking a career rather than addressing underlying system failures?
So if I understand it correctly, meaning like they're still using AI to develop these investigations and the actual word, verbiage of the investigation, but they're every one of them is a human error. That's like the most probable root cause.
And that's what I'm gathering here because the next
Yeah.
part says, I know from past experience that most regulatory bodies like the FDA and EMA strictly mandate that human error is rarely a true root cause. And it's most often a symptom of a deeper process flaw.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I mean, if we're just talking about the old, I mean, this isn't something that's new. Folks have been doing this for decades. There where it was like, it was like what was the most probable root cause? Like it was a human error. Someone made a mistake. We're going to retrain them and we're going to move on. And that has been a pattern that has not been successful. When you don't get to the real most probable root cause, then you can't get to the most effective kappa because and that's where this whole thing falls apart where it's not a complete so and it isn't really acceptable, and that's why I know my FDA folks would jump on that in 2 seconds if they came in and started noticing a pattern. You still see this on 483s now where they will absolutely challenge you that if they again, there are times when it is absolutely a human error. But if there's a pattern there that they can notice that, like, some large percentage of the most probable root cause is human error and retraining. I mean, come on, that's been for a long time. That's not acceptable.
Okay, and I think the last question here that we have says, and I don't really know the answer to this. Do we know if the inspection was conducted randomly, unannounced, or if the company was given any prior notification?
Yeah.
And what was the company's history, any previous history or any other warning letters?
Right. And we don't have that information. I mean, I guess we could find it if we got the EIR, the Establishment Inspection Report from that. Now, I've seen the 483. They would have a little bit more in there about the history. So we don't know, was this their, and I didn't even think to look up in the dashboard whether this was their first inspection or not. But I can't imagine that, well, and I guess also we're noticing now that in the warning letters, they're starting to put it was an unannounced inspection at the top because the first paragraph always talks about the inspection that took place at the location and the dates and that when that was. And I've seen three this year where it actually specifically mentioned that it was an unannounced inspection. So unannounced inspections, they're not going to call you and let you know when you're in the domestic United States. I mean, it's not absolute. There have been times, and there are always times when it might be necessary to make an upfront call to make sure the folks are going to be there or whatever. But in the end, I think that this case. There's no information. We don't have that information right now. But I think all of this would have played into how they went about it. Like the enforcement decision, like we're going to send a warning letter. I mean, they had to, based on the results of this inspection, and I can't imagine that this would have been. It feels to me like it's a first inspection kind of thing. Like this was their initial inspection. I don't know yet. We'd have to read the EIR, but I don't know how you would have ever been able to make it to your next inspection if you had been inspected before and even if they weren't using the AI in the way they were. But it appears as if they were, like they were starting to develop specifications and batch records and everything using this AI. So that's what leads me to believe this is probably their initial inspection. but I can't say for sure.
Yeah. And there's one more question that came in here that I think is pretty interesting. So, and I it would be interesting to actually put some of these questions in AI and see what we got back as well. But it says in this example of the warning letter that we're discussing, there appears to be a significant lack of foundational quality and management oversight. Are we aware of any AI observations from a company using AI constructively and compliantly, but FDA still raised an observation that might be considered as a lesson learned?
Hmm. I'm not aware of it. And that's the part of what I was talking about in the beginning about building the case study. I mean, like a lot of the times it's one way or the other. You want to build the case study so you can demonstrate how it failed, and that gives everybody the ideas about how this went wrong. But a lot of times you want to build the case the same thing on the opposite side. You want to build the case study in a way that they used it effectively and had success. And so I think that we don't have the example yet, and that's why I said like this was the worst case scenario to come out for the negative side, like how things could go wrong with an inappropriate use of AI. But I'm hoping that, and again, this is the problem because we don't get 483s or warning letters when things go right. Like if they're using the AI, it'll be buried and there's no issues with it, and how they're using it and that sort of thing, then it'll be buried in the section of the EIR and it won't be on the 483 and there won't be a warning letter. So unless you're really looking for it, you won't have that information available to you. But that's why I'm hoping that like maybe next year we start having conferences and those case studies are coming out with some,
Right.
maybe a big pharma company has that they're developing it right now and they're ready to launch next year this time and say, look, this is what we've done. This is how we made it work. This is how it didn't work. And we thought we had to make some changes and it was dynamic, but in the end, we did achieve the desired outcome. Like that's the case study I'm waiting for. And as I said, I think we're going to get there, but it's going to be hard to find out because, unfortunately, the FDA only documents what goes wrong at inspections. They don't really document what goes well. And I've always had a problem with that, and I've changed that for how I do my work on the outside now. I do have a long list of observations at the end of at the day or the week or whatever, but I try to put in some things that I found that went well as well. That doesn't always happen.
So the FDA doesn't give out good participation awards?
See, I mean, I've always thought that would, and maybe some folks do. I did even in the FDA, at the closeout meeting, you'd bring up something that actually went well, and it's a psychological thing and
Sure.
that sort of thing too. But you don't want to, and of course, in a case like this where pretty much every aspect of the operation was going wrong, it's hard to find something that, it's not absolute that you'd be able to do that every time. But if you had an opportunity, you would. But unfortunately, like there's no documentation from the FDA, or maybe there will be, and they will come out, in the conferences and start providing information about how AI was, used successfully.
Sure. All right, great. Well, thank you.
Sure.
So that's it for our our topics and our conversation today, and we hope you enjoyed it. It was fun for us. We're looking forward to future events. We've got two more topics that will be coming to you. We're going to do one a quarter in the fall and in the winter. And then we will also be updating everything on our LinkedIn page. So please follow us on our LinkedIn page and connect with us. If again, the slides will be made available to everybody. The recording link, when available, will be sent out. And then we would also appreciate feedback. So I can throw my, I think this will work. I can throw my email in here as well. If you have questions or comments, feel free to let me know if you need anything, and then we will definitely be in touch. So let us know if we can all do anything for you. So thank you, Doug, a million times
Yes,
over. We appreciate your
sure. It
participation.
was my pleasure. Thank you very much, and good luck to everyone.
Thank you, everyone.